So I've been thinking recently about what makes a video game special, especially when we live in an age where there's just so much video games being produced. And while there is a lot of factors in what makes a video game work, I did realize that the soundtrack is something that just makes a game really unforgettable. And the soundtrack is just something that undeniably plays a big part in what helps a game resonate with the player. And with how flexible and creative developers can get when implementing music in a video game, then it could lead to masterpieces praised by fans for years simply for the soundtrack alone. With Nintendo seemingly being the king of this, having great music across all of their franchises dating all the way back from the 90s. But of course, not only Nintendo is known for this, as developers were always working hard to achieve this, and mostly succeeded. And so for the sake of the video, I'll be splitting this video up into 3 sections: atmosphere, gameplay, and adaptive music, and really try to take a look at what makes a soundtrack work. So, what exactly generates good atmosphere? Well, good atmosphere is generated by creating a tone or mood tailored to match the aesthetic of a game and add to a scene, usually creating an emotion or feeling out of an environment. This can cause you to feel a sense of happiness, sadness, nostalgia, or dread just by looking at a game's environment. And with some environments just being so atmospheric that it can really tell its own story just by looking at it. And so, with having an atmospheric environment, combining that with the right music is usually key for a cool setting. And probably the easiest example of this is a horror game, because horror games need to have oppressive and dreadful atmosphere, combined with really good sound design, in order to work as a horror game and really boost that scare factor. Another good example of this is the opening of Half-Life 2, which is not a horror game, but think about what made the opening so special. So the second the game starts, you've basically been thrown into the oppressive, imperialistic ruling of City 17, where now you're being watched everywhere, and the city itself has been transformed into this depressing state of sadness and insanity. And as you take some of your first steps outside to see what's become of this entire city, you hear this.
Of course, your question touches on one of the basic biological impulses, with all its associated hopes and fears for the future of the species. I also detect some
It's some pretty heavy stuff to throw onto the player in the first couple hours, but I mean, it really does set the tone for what to expect. And it's moments like this in video games that really do just leave a long-lasting impression on you. So now for gameplay, one of, if not the biggest factor in the quality of the game. Usually being the core and heart of the enjoyment of a game with tight mechanics and sometimes an enjoyable yet very brutal learning curve where you'll be spending most of your time in. But it's also the place where you'll probably be having the most fun in, so it only makes sense that with a strong gameplay loop, it would need a strong set of music to fully immerse you in what you're doing. So take Doom for example, which is a critically acclaimed game by both fans and reviewers alike for its extremely fun gameplay loop and OST, where most praise comes from the adrenaline of the moment-to-moment gameplay with stuff like fighting giant hordes at a time or flying across the screen at Mach 2, quick thinking, chaining combos, and all while hearing some of the coolest music blasting in your ears. And with being such a fast-paced FPS, the music directly reflects that with its fast-paced guitar riffs and bass-heavy sounds that just fuel your energy to keep playing. The soundtrack being arguably one of its biggest factors in what kept people playing has also won multiple awards for just how good it is. And with the set pieces, to the heavy metal soundtrack, to the fun gameplay of Doom, it all comes together to just make you feel like you're in control, leaving Doom Eternal as one of the most popular games of 2020. And another game I have to highlight is definitely Black Mesa. Specifically the topside battle in the mission We Got Hostiles. And the mission's pretty alright for the most part, it's usual Half-Life stuff, until you get near the end of the mission, and you get on an elevator where you slowly start going up to a base of military men, all while this track slowly starts creeping up on you. And it's really only when the gameplay can seamlessly blend with the music that it can just create such a memorable moment like that. And of course, to just briefly highlight the JRPG genre that usually thrive off of having satisfying and well-composed music to accompany you throughout what is usually a 50+ hour long game. And due to its limited, yet strategic use of gameplay usually revolving around a turn-based combat system where each attack needs to be planned and thought out in order to win a fight. And so of course with gameplay being naturally slow, having good music to hold you over is usually a high priority for a lot of developers who make JRPGs. And with music being as integral as it is to the flow of gameplay, it's also bringing in a lot of new people who are interested in a game or series just because of its music. And on to the final topic of adaptive music or interactive music. So before with atmosphere and gameplay, I mentioned how music is genuinely used to bring life to a scene or elevate a scenario. But with adaptive music, this turns music into a straight up gameplay mechanic, which is pretty cool. Left 4 Dead, for example, works beautifully with this, as sound cues are everywhere in that game. And so if you've ever played Left 4 Dead, then you should know by hearing this. Then you better regroup with the team, as an angry tank is probably on its way. Or if you hear this, then you better start walking slowly and scanning the area, as you wouldn't want to alert the witch to your position. And Left 4 Dead is filled with great sound cues that do a good job of ramping up the tension while also skillfully alerting the player about what's about to go down. And then on the other hand, we have Resident Evil 4, where when you're walking down the sewers for the first time, and even before you even see anything, you just start hearing this. And the unsettling nature of it just screams you're not alone, but also kind of flexes its really good sound design. And giving a heads up to the player in the form of music is way more intuitive than the annoying pop-ups or tutorials that we see in gaming today. And it also just doesn't hold the player's hand. It allows them to learn the enemy types more naturally just by playing the game. And incorporating music to be a literal gameplay mechanic has really just been an evolution of video games, as it's something that's been showing up a lot in modern gaming today. Now, this usually goes unnoticed in most games, which is really unfortunate, as it's one of the coolest aspects of video game music. And when you have all these segments working together in harmony with each other, then the end result is something that usually looks a little like this.